New Orleans Saints first round pick Taliese Fuaga simply checks all the boxes. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I'm your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints, as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're diving deep on Taliese Fuaga, the New Orleans Saints' first overall selection, their first round pick out of Oregon State, soon to be their starting right tackle. We're going to be taking a look at where his game could use some growth, where his game is already pro-ready, and how it is that he simply checks all the boxes to become the New Orleans Saints starter, especially after we've heard our first early glimpse of what the New Orleans Saints offense will look like directly from offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak. We appreciate you as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I admit it, I've got a competitive side, and it's a big-time fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist to the classic Monopoly that you know and love. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go on the App Store or Google Play now for free. Simply put, Taliese Fuaga, the Oregon State offensive tackle, the New Orleans Saints' new offensive tackle, first-round selection in the 2024 NFL Draft, just checks all the boxes to be a long-time starting pro for the New Orleans Saints on their otherwise kind of deteriorating, I guess is the right word, offensive line. And a big part of it comes down to the attitude that he plays with, the scheme that he's a part of, and something that Klint Kubiak said in his interview with Aaron Summers, which you can find on the New Orleans Saints YouTube page. That's where I want to start. Aaron Summers asked him what it was that the New Orleans Saints and what he wants in his players. What are you looking for quality-wise in your player? And he said 3 words right off the bat: smart, tough, reliable. Those are the things that he wants. So let's break that down, because the first one kind of matches up with one of the other qualities that we've already said, the experience in the scheme that he already has worked with. I asked him when he did his Zoom call with us after being selected about his sort of comfort in being in a wide zone system. And he said that the wide zone system, outside run, all of that was the bread and butter of Oregon State's offense. So he knows the scheme that the New Orleans Saints want to be a part of. One of the other things that Klint Kubiak said was that they have a very good idea of what they want their run game to look like and what it is that they want to build their run game around. I can tell you right now that that is going to be running to the outside and trying to get these running backs in space and getting the offensive line moving off the ball. And that is something that Taliese Fuaga has a ton of experience doing. So that checks box number 1 in terms of smarts. The next thing you want to look at is tough. Taliese Fuaga, 25 straight starts, 35 straight games over at Oregon State. He is very clearly somebody that has been durable and reliable. The only game that he missed in his entire career with Oregon State was a bowl game, which he opted out in because he should already know that he was a top offensive tackle in this class. Now, he turned around and still participated in postseason games and things like that, which I think tells you a lot. Went out there and tested. I think that's one of the things that Dennis Allen mentioned that he absolutely loved about Fuaga, is that he was not afraid to go out there and compete, despite the fact that he already knew that he was likely going to be a top 15 selection. And it was the New Orleans Saints that made him that top 15 selection by selecting him 14th in this year's draft. Box checked. Tough. And also, in that toughness, he also just plays with a ton of aggression. I like mean offensive linemen. If you're an everydayer on this show, you know that. That's why I liked Patrick Paul. It's why I liked Troy Fautanu. It's why I liked Taliese Fuaga. It's why I liked Olu Fashanu as well. Not just because they were all great offensive linemen in college, don't get me wrong, but I want the guys with the mean streak and everything. He had one block, Fuaga did, where he got called for a unnecessary roughness penalty against Washington State, where he had put a guy on the ground and then went in and finished the job, like right there and everything, and ended up driving him into the ground, ended up getting flagged for a penalty. Don't do that. You ain't got to do that. But I love the aggression. I love the attitude. I love the condition of which that play is symptomatic of. I love that, and I want that attitude on any offensive line in the NFL. And Taliese Fuaga is set to bring that type of aggression to this team. And he doesn't get flagged for a lot of penalties otherwise. I don't think it's going to be a big thing you got to worry about. Not a big deal. It was just kind of one play where he was like, you know what, I'm going to finish this play. Feeling himself, and I like that. Go ahead. Feel it. And then the last thing he mentioned was reliable. 730 plus pass blocking snaps in the last 2 seasons over at Oregon State in the Pac-12, which has very good edge rushers. Went up against Laiatu Latu, the first edge rusher off the board in this year's draft, who was drafted 1 pick immediately after Fuaga was at 15 to the Indianapolis Colts. 734 pass blocking snaps, not a single sack allowed. Not a single sack allowed during that time. And to take that a step further, only 18 hurries allowed, only 5 hurries allowed over the course of his career as well. And this is a guy that spent his entire high school days playing at left tackle and at guard, playing right tackle effectively for the first time in his career over the course of those 25 games where he started at right tackle, and he put together that kind of production. So that checks the box of reliability. I also think that his ability to play on both sides of the ball and his comfort with the idea of playing inside and out is something that also leads you to the reliability part of it as well. So let's check the reliable box. So smart, tough, reliable, Taliese Fuaga. Those things should all go together. So I love this selection for the New Orleans Saints. He was the guy that we pinpointed earlier in the week before the draft that, yeah, this is probably going to be the guy. A big part of that reason was because we got the new information around Ryan Ramczyk and sort of the lack of confidence that's there in terms of what his future looks like with the team. And so now that becomes the only question for Taliese is, when does he start? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Does he start week 1 in 2024? Does he play all 17 games as a starter at right tackle in 2024? Or does it take until 2025 or beyond to get him out on the field? One way or another, once he gets out there, he'll hold on to that job. So even if Ryan Ramczyk isn't ready to go at the beginning of the season, but there's a feeling that he might be able to go later on in the year, it's going to be really hard to bump Fuaga out of that spot unless there's some other injury somewhere on the offensive line and you end up moving him there. But otherwise, this feels like it's Fuaga's job to take, and it's his job to keep once he gets it. I think Taliese Fuaga was a fantastic selection for the New Orleans Saints, and I think that he'll be a long-time starter, health provided, in the NFL, and particularly for the New Orleans Saints. And it all began with that selection on April 25th. His draft party with 100 plus people, including a ton of family members out in Hawaii. He's ready to ball. Can't wait to see him at mini camps. And when we're at mini camps, the thing that I'm really excited to see are some of the things that he's best at. So what are those things, and what should you be so excited to see out of this guy once he gets out on the football field? Let's break down where his game is at its best up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. You've heard me talk about my competitive side, but now let's talk about some of the good stuff that this game just has. As I'm playing it and as I'm advancing further along, I'm sure just like you're starting to see some of the new features that they have, like your ability to be able to team up with friends on time tournaments where you also get to try out a bunch of different fun mini games and all that other stuff. Gives you a bunch of awesome prizes that you can unlock that include unique stickers. I love collectibles in games. One of the things that keeps me most engaged. So you got stickers that you can trade and collect to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces for you to navigate the boards with as well. So you can try it out and check it out today, because everything when it comes to Monopoly Go is exciting and changing every day when it comes to tournaments, challenges, collectibles, and much more. There is no limit to the ways for you to be able to enjoy the discovery of Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download Monopoly Go now for free in the App Store and Google Play. All right, family, Taliese Fuaga is ready-made for an NFL football field, and one of the biggest reasons why is his capability and ability to move at his size. We appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports today as well, especially for all of the draft takes around some of the biggest selections in the NFL draft from the people that know the teams the best, that cover them every day, just like I cover the Saints every single day here on Locked On Saints. Go and check it out on Locked On Sports Today, the nation's first, or YouTube's first, national sports 24/7 stream. You can find it on YouTube as well as on the free Amazon Fire TV channels at part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One of the things that makes Taliese Fuaga so incredibly special is his ability to move at the size that he carries. 6'5", 224 pounds, just shy of 230 pounds, came in a little bit heavier, 2 pounds heavier at his pro day. That's going to be good playing weight for him. But the way that he moves and the efficiency with which he moves, I think, is one of the most impressive things about him, especially at that size. You want the size 100% on the offensive line because you want somebody that's going to be able to go and move bodies. You trying to tackle the running back that I'm protecting for, you go here now. You want that on the offensive line, but you also want guys that are going to be able to keep up with the ever-changing, ever-growing mold of athleticism that comes with edge rushers and run stoppers, edge defenders, we'll call them as well. You don't want the edge to get set on you as a tackle before the rest of your offensive line gets out ahead, or you don't want you as the offensive tackle to have the edge set and the rest of your offensive line passes you up and it just screws up all the lanes. You've got to be able to move, and this guy can move. He can move, and he can stay on his feet. Too often do we see offensive linemen in the NFL, especially on the interior, falling over. I think that NFL interior offensive line play is one of the worst positions of play or worst units of play unilaterally across the league, because a lot of times when you're coming in through high school and college and you're playing on that interior line, if you're really, really good, you get moved to tackle, even if you're undersized. If you're extremely athletic, you get moved to the defensive tackle spot, or you slim down and you play another position like tight end or edge rusher, things like that. Those guys that make it through end up balling out in the NFL, and they become very obvious when it comes to the better part of the interior offensive line class, particularly guard. Center plays typically pretty good around the NFL because it's easy to specialize there. But guard, people get moved out of that position all the time before they have the opportunity to develop into what would be the best guards in the NFL in most cases, because there just aren't that many. And so you see a lot of people in that interior position falling over and all these other things. Taliese Fuaga stays on his feet. And the only time that he goes down is when he's taking you down with him as a defender. And I bring up the guard thing just because I think that's where we see it. But we certainly see it a lot at the tackle spot as well. These guys falling over, not being able to finish plays, stuff like that. Fuaga is very balanced and moves functionally so incredibly well that that's got to be a huge, huge deal for this New Orleans Saints offense, which I mentioned in the first segment here about Klint Kubiak. What they're going to want, right? They want their offensive linemen to be able to move off the football. You got to be able to move laterally, not just push up field. And so moving laterally means you've got to have really good footwork. You can't cross your feet, all those other things. Your footwork has to be on point. And Fuaga's footwork, second to maybe Troy Fautanu, is one of the best in this class. And that, I think, has to be a big part of the reason why you bring a guy like that in. He's got experience knowing how to utilize that footwork in a wide zone base and a wide zone offense. And then now you get to take that and then implant him into a wide zone base offense again here in the NFL with the changing offense for the New Orleans Saints. I'll say this right now. If it was still Pete Carmichael's offense, Fuaga would not be a good fit. But with Klint Kubiak's new fit and the offense that I've been told is expected to be 100% different, and obviously 100% different is an overstretch, but is going to be very, very different than what Pete Carmichael's offense was with the New Orleans Saints over the course of the past 2 years, that probably makes Taliese Fuaga a perfect fit. In fact, I'll go further than that. It does make him a perfect fit. So I absolutely love that. I think he does a good job in terms of that mobility, keeping that theme going, the way that he can move at his size, does a good job doing that up to the second level as well. So not just laterally side to side, being able to move and lead the way on the play side for, a run play, or on the backside, getting ahead for the potential cutbacks and things like that. But he also does a good job getting up to the second level and clearing out some of those linebackers up in the second level and everything like that. That was where he got called for that Washington State penalty, when he drove the linebacker into the ground and then drove the linebacker deeper into the ground, sending him to the shadow realm, if you will. So I do think that that's a big piece too, and how quickly he can get up there, right? Like, we're not talking about a guy that, ran a sub 5 second 40-yard dash here. He ran a 5.13, but still, that's athletic for an offensive line. That's still fast for an offensive lineman. But his ability to get to that second level where he's not having to run 40 yards, but instead he's running 5-10 yards, that is where I look at the efficiency of him being able to get up there. Doesn't waste steps, doesn't waste movement. That comes with that sort of training of understanding how to utilize your footwork, how to work your feet, not cross over, not take false steps, extra steps, things like that get you behind the 8 ball on the play. He does a very good job of efficiently moving there and utilizing his quickness, speed, and athleticism to get there before a linebacker is able to ready themselves for the oncoming onslaught that's coming from a Taliese Fuaga. The other thing that I'll mention too is just that he's got really, really good hands. And this is something that I think becomes very important for most offensive linemen. And it's how quickly you can get your hands, how quickly you can shoot your hands, how quickly you have them ready to go and everything. He does a very good job with this. He actually did it really well against Laiatu Latu in the game against UCLA. You also saw him kind of flash his hands to the outside to get guys to take longer arcs around to the quarterback as well, to where you can kind of just ward them off and judo, right? To where you use the opponent's momentum against them and all these other things. I don't know, any martial arts folks out there, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I won't be offended. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like, utilizing the momentum. And so it's like, I'm going to flash my hands to the outside, get you to take a wider arc, which is going to give me the opportunity to get my hands on your inside shoulder and then just yoink, right? Just kind of nudge you away, and then you either over pursue the quarterback or you end up falling down because I've utilized leverage there. And he does a really good job with his leverage. We talked about the balance and not falling over. That's because he's coming from a real strong base in the lower half of his body, which means he's got that core power. And the reason why some of his hand strikes are so strong is because of that base. It's kind of like a quarterback throwing with just their arm versus throwing from their base. And think about that, but instead think about it as a hand strike situation. It's very, very similar. So when he's able to throw those punches and everything, it's not just the arm strength, it's the fact that he's getting that power from the lower body and transferring it up to get his hands on that defensive player. So I really, really like that. And I think the other thing is just attitude, right? It's all about attitude. He's all about the team. He's all about play. He's a good leader. He was a team captain in his final year at Oregon State. That's another one that checks a big time box, of course, for this New Orleans Saints team, and his ability to be able to translate to the next level by understanding the importance of leadership and accountability. And I think those two things go very far for a Taliese Fuaga. So those are the things that I think are ready-made for him. But there are still some things that you're looking at that you're hoping to see some growth from when it comes to him. And some of it is that aggressiveness, but it's not in the way that you might think. Let's get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's got everything that you're looking for, especially with the playoffs being underway in the NBA and NHL, with the baseball being in full swing and much more. There's a ton to get in on. You can bet on every game over at FanDuel, and you can check out all of their super cool NFL rookie betting odds as well. Of course, Caleb Williams is the favorite for Offensive Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, plus 500. A my guy in this draft. I think a my guy for a lot of guys in this draft. Let me not pat myself on the back too much. It's Dallas Turner. Of course, he's going to be the Defensive Rookie of the Year favorite going in. You can go and check out the odds for other guys like Jaden Daniels and more as well over at FanDuel. And right now, new customers will get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's right. That's $150. Win or lose, doesn't matter right off the bat. So make sure you go and check them out. What are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation? Aggression might be the one thing, or one of the biggest things, that you're looking at to see some growth when it comes to Taliese Fuaga, but it's not in the way that you might think. We appreciate you very much for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to move to the Saints' second round pick, trading up for Kool-Aid McKinstry. We'll take a look at some of Nick Saban's comments around it, how quickly we could potentially see him on the field and what situations would have to take place to get him out there sooner rather than later, what our expected timeline is. And we'll also take a look again at where his game is ready-made and where his game could use some growth. But I'll tell you what, Kool-Aid McKinstry was my CB1 in this class, so I'm really, really excited about what he could potentially turn into at the next level, wherever he ended up. But it's super cool that I get to cover it here with the New Orleans Saints. All right, so let's take a look here at some of the things that we're looking at growth-wise for Taliese Fuaga, the New Orleans Saints' first-round selection out of Oregon State, who will probably start at right tackle sooner rather than later. We're just waiting on clarity in terms of what the expectation really is for Ryan Ramczyk, which I don't expect that we're going to get super soon, but we'll see how things go when it comes to all of that. So as we look at where we believe that we would like to see some growth in Taliese Fuaga's game, the first thing that I want to latch onto is aggression. And I think that when I talk about aggression, what many people are going to think of is we're talking about like playing too late through the whistle, all these other things, getting that flag against Washington State with driving the linebacker into the ground, shadow realm, all those other things. It's not actually that. That's not really the thing that I'm thinking of. My thing is, remember how I talked about how he's got those really, really good hands and he strikes really well? Sometimes when he comes out of his stance, he comes out of his stance too high. It's almost like he's too excited to block the guy that's in front of him. So that's what I mean by the aggression there when it comes to that. He wants this, you want to stay a little bit low. Now, if you can get somebody by their, shoulder pads or really get your hands on them and then drive them up to the point to where like their chin is up and they don't know where they're going. Luke Braun actually, and I talked about this with Theo Johnson in today's episode of Locked On NFL, which you can find wherever you get your podcast, same place that you're listening to this or watching this. We talked about how like it's not always a bad thing, but sometimes if you come up too high and your leverage gets out from under you, it allows a defensive lineman to get that sort of low ground underneath you, which doesn't really do you any favors as an offensive lineman. So sometimes you'll come out of those stances and maybe get a little bit too up, high up earlier than you would really want him to be. Because you want to be able to, you think about like the sleds and stuff like that you watch these guys drive all the time and the combine and everything. If you go up too high, the sled digs into the back heel of the sled, digs into the field, and then you can't push it anymore. What they're trying to do is see your leg drive. They want to see you get a good leverage, keep your spinal angle right so that you're not up too high, so that you're able to drive your feet underneath you and push the bag. And that's what they want to see. And a big part of that is your ability to throw guys out of the club. If you want to translate that into something that you've seen on tape before, that's when an offensive lineman gets good leverage underneath a tackle or a defensive tackle or defensive end. And instead of throwing them down immediately, just drives and drives and drives and pushes and pushes and pushes and takes them 5-6 yards upfield. That's what you want to see. So not getting too upright too early gives you the opportunity to be able to do that. So I think that's one of the things you're going to want to be seeing from Taliese Fuaga is can he keep himself low, keep that spinal angle right, and be able to drive guys, 5-6 yards back on their heels. I think that's another one of those big ones. The other thing that is going to be really interesting to watch is he's really, really good tight into the line of scrimmage, but in situations where he's had to go out in space in terms of being a leading blocker or a pulling tackle and stuff like that, there have been times where maybe like some guys will get the best of him. And those are usually crafty, pursuit players and things like that. So you just want to see him get a little bit more comfortable, not having somebody immediately to his left, not having somebody immediately to his right. I think he does this really, really well in the pass blocking game when he has to take a little bit more of a wider set. He'll jump set some guys. And when he jump sets guys, so a jump set is kind of when you're saying basically like, I'm going to eat up the space that you have as a defensive player to get your move in because I'm just bigger and stronger than you are. And so there are some times on tape that you'll see him very confidently jump step, take some space away, and then just drive a guy. And that's one of those aggressive things that I think can work for him as long as he doesn't give up the leverage. But there are other times where he's not necessarily jump stepping. He's taking a wider angle. And so he's trying to flash the hands and get the edge rusher to take a wider angle. And in cases like that, when he's going up against somebody that's really, really crafty and has a variety of pass rushing moves, then maybe you'll see him give up a pressure and things like that, let a guy get beyond him and everything. It's never been to the point where he's given up sacks and stuff like that. Again, 0 sacks given up over the course of his career. So I'm really like nitpicking here in terms of just like little things that you want to see. It's not like what we observed in Trevor Penning. We always talked about how Trevor Penning in pass protection in particular always had the weakness of speed rush moves to his inside shoulder. And we haven't really seen him make progress in that just yet. We'll see what John Benton and the new New Orleans Saints staff can do in terms of helping him develop there. It's not that same deal, but it's just something about not necessarily having the same level of confidence in space that sometimes maybe gets taken advantage of. I don't know if confidence is the right word. I doubt confidence is really the issue, but you get what I'm saying here. That's where maybe the confidence of a viewer is like, okay, this is where something could potentially, kind of go sideways or give him a little bit of trouble. The other thing is his ability to quickly recover. He seems to be a guy that, like, once you get past him, if you get past him in a particular way, and particularly for speedier edge rushers, that he's not able to fully make a recovery. You've seen some really impressive offensive line play in college before, to where guys will, win on the outside shoulder of an offensive tackle. And instead of that offensive tackle giving up on the play or even pursuing to the outside shoulder, they'll spin back over their inside shoulder and then meet that edge rusher over on the other side. You don't really see many examples of that in Fuaga's game. Doesn't mean that he can't do it. You just haven't seen many examples of it. Now, a big part of it is because he just doesn't get beat that much, right? We're talking about 18 hurries allowed over the course of his 2 years as a full-time starter and change during the time that he, saw a little bit of action in the 2021 season, which was really only 18 snaps. But again, nothing that he gave up during that time. So I think that's kind of the biggest piece that you're looking at, is he's just not used to getting beat. And so when you get beat, how do you develop recoveries? It's kind of like what we talk about for defensive linemen that win all the time in college, is that they don't have many counter moves. That's something that you definitely want to see get built up. Christian Boyd, the defensive tackle out of University of Northern Iowa that the Saints drafted in the 6th round, talked about exactly that. I asked him, where do you want to take your next step in your game? And he said, I want to develop counter moves. Not because he didn't have counter moves, but because when you watch the tape, he just didn't lose that often. He didn't have to go for counter moves very much. And so you think about that, but from the offensive line perspective, how do you recover? And so just being able to kind of lace him up with the things that he needs to know, smarts-wise, how to recover on plays, I think could potentially go a pretty long way for him. But these are all coachable things, kind of similar to what we talked about with Spencer Rattler. Like, a lot of this stuff is coachable. And then on the Spencer Rattler part, you're talking about, like, attitude and stuff like that. No question on that when it comes to Fuaga at all. But again, I think the attitude stuff is even overplayed for Rattler too. So I love what the New Orleans Saints got here, and I can't wait to see him on the field May 10th, 11th, and 12th during minicamp and beyond. I'm very, very excited to see him. But that's what you're getting in a Taliese Fuaga. If you want to hear more on what you're getting from the rest of these draft prospects, we're diving in on Kool-Aid McKinstry in tomorrow's episode. So make sure you come back for that. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Locked On Pels, especially after the Pelicans and Oklahoma City game, a must listen. Make sure you go and check that out, as well as Locked On LSU with Caroline Fenton. Thank you very much. All throughout draft weekend and beyond, we've had such a fun time here, and it's all because of you, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.